Hi guys, hope you're doing well. This is going to be a prophecy update. This is one that I've been wanting to do, just kind of looking at all the things that are happening. There's definitely a lot going on for sure. So I try to get these out there when I think it's significant. And there's definitely been some significant things that have happened. So one of those things, so there's basically two key points that I want to kind of really address, maybe a third. We'll see how much time we got to get into. I try to keep these short. But one of those is the game has kind of changed for Israel and the things that are happening in Israel, and you can kind of see where they're being, they're with this new government there. There's really, they're really in a tough situation. There's a great article that was written. And it was about, it's written by a lady named Caroline Glick, working for Israel or writing for Israel. Hayom, I guess I pronounced that. Hayom. And anyway, this article she wrote says how Putin understands the Lepid Bennett government. And anyway, it was published on 7/30/21. Pretty amazing article. In it, she goes through a lot of detail about what led us up to that point, where suddenly something's changed. Putin, like I've always said, he's a master politician. The guy's always operating on a strategic level. And he's always, he's one of those guys that, he's definitely, in a lot of ways, he's easily outmaneuvering a lot of politicians out there. I'm not saying he's never outmaneuvered, but he's typically, one of those politicians that's scary, that he plays for keeps, and this guy's, in that sense, you have to have respect for him, for sure. And he basically, he in essence, he notified Israel the game has changed. And so Israel basically was operating with, free reign basically in Syria to go after Iranian forces that had positioned themselves in Syria to protect their own strategic interests, their own national security, and their own people. Because we understand that Iran has a bent to destroy Israel, almost a demonic bent, to destroy Israel for whatever reason. And, they definitely do not like Israel, and they want to destroy them. They want to see themselves as the preeminent Islamic power in the Ummah, as it were, throughout the world. And they want the respect and admiration of, and rise up Shia Islam as, the predominant power in the world, I guess. That's the only thing I can think of. I'm not in their mind, but that's what it seems like. And, to destroy Israel would just be, the feather in the hat of all hats, as it were. And so I think they really want the destruction of Israel, and they mean it. And I think they're positioning themselves in Syria to do that. And with Lebanon, the instability that's going on there economically right now, I mean, what's going on in Lebanon is going to trickle effect throughout everywhere else too, because we're going to see other nations in the same situation come September, October, November, December, so forth. We're going to see this, and all laying the foundation for what we know is going to come. And we'll get into that a little bit later. But very interesting things that are happening. As Christians, we always need to be looking, to be ready, as Christ told us, to be alert, to be ready, to be like the wise virgins, prepared, waiting for the Lord to come. The signs are all around us. And this is, pretty one of those moments, I don't know what you want to call it. You can call it, I guess, a watershed moment in Israel's history, as it were, with Russia and so forth, and Syria, with this whole war that's been going on there. I mean, basically what happened was Russia decided, obviously under the authority and direction of Putin, is that they would assist in shooting down the missiles that are occurring from Israel. Some reported that, I heard some early reports that, possibly even one of the planes had been damaged or something, but I don't think anything like that happened. But anyway, the missiles themselves, a certain portion of them was shot down. And anywhere from 5 out of 8 or something like that, but were shot down successfully. And it really sent a shockwave to the security of Israel, if it's true. And it seems to be. And what she's writing about, this Caroline Glick, is a great article. I would recommend it for sure. I'll try to post it in a link into this message. But if I don't, you can look it up for yourself. And it's just titled How Putin Understands the Lepid Bennett Government by Caroline Glick, Glick. And anyway, really good article. And in it, she brings out a lot of the stuff that really has transpired over the last 10, 12 years, whatever, And as she gets into this, she's basically talking about the fact that Russia had this agreement to allow for Israel to basically defend itself against these positioned forces of Iran. And that's what they've been doing for a number of years now. I mean, it was almost weekly, sometimes nightly, you would hear about airstrikes from Israel striking, in Damascus and so forth, which leads us to the point where we understand that's going to happen in Damascus, which will be the destruction of Damascus in Isaiah 17. So we're kind of looking, not that we want destruction of anybody, but prophecy is what we're trying to be wise in a sense. And the prophecy about about Damascus is one that I think is very near. And, and as we see these things happening, you could very well see the fulfillment of Isaiah 17, the destruction of Damascus occur. So anyway, Russia basically shot down these missiles. So now, what do you do if you're Israel? Your airplanes are going in there. You're either going to have to face and defeat, possibly destroy Russian-controlled anti-aircraft assets, which could possibly kill Russian soldiers, which would bring you direct confrontation with Russia themselves. Very dangerous, right? And if you don't do anything, then you're seen weak in the eyes of someone who, when you're dealing with someone like Putin or, Erdogan, or leaders in Iran, they smell blood. They're not going to say, oh, okay, they got our message, that's enough. These people play for keeps. These guys are the real deal. So I think that, I think if Israel's smart, and I think they have very smart politicians, very smart people, but yeah, I realize that they can't just sit back and wait for something positive to happen, as it were. Sometimes it's the smart play, but sometimes it's not. And, maybe that's what they're gambling on. And that will lead to the Gog Magog war, Ezekiel 38, 39 war that, I think is near, really near. Is it pre-tribulational? Is it mid-tribulation? Hard to say sometimes on that war. It's not real clear. I kind of tend to think that it's pre-tribulational. It's going to happen before the tribulation, but it very well could happen in the tribulation itself too. But in any case, I think we can certainly see the destruction of Damascus, for sure, pre-tribulational. And that could lead to the Gog Magog war, because Israel will be seen as a pariah nation if they wind up destroying, Iran and its positioned forces there, which could easily lead to this major escalation that we would see take place in the Gog Magog war, which ultimately we know can very well lead to the rise of the Antichrist and bring us to other points that I'm going to get into here real quick. But just wanted you to be aware that we're seeing a change in Russia's attitude towards Israel, and the fact that they're helping Syria shoot down those missiles. That's a dramatic change. That's a big change. And it forces Israel to have to now change how they deal with things. And that's where you can see events can spiral out of control. Like when they shot down the Russian plane at one time, Russia was very serious about it. You can see something like that happening. And, with other elements where Russians can be coming directly in fire of Israel. And yeah, and Israel or Iran would definitely not shed a tear over that. They would welcome that, because they would love to see Russia pulled into a war where they're helping to the invasion of Israel. And it says, interesting enough, in Ezekiel 38, that, 39, it's like a hook is put into the jaw of Russia to drag them down to this war, almost against their will, like they're not really wanting to do this, but they do it anyway. They're dragged into something. And that's where you can kind of see how this thing is progress. This is an act like this could very well lead to that. And that's why I think it's an essential moment. I think it's a watershed moment that really could transition us over to an event like the destruction of Damascus. If we see some kind of sarin gas used, or some kind of missile launched at Israel with sarin gas, like, you got to remember, Bashar al-Assad in Syria used supposedly chemicals on his own his own people. And if that's true, then I mean, how evil can you be? But you could see where some Iranian force or some rogue force, or even somebody who's directed to do so, would ultimately lead to a retaliatory strike by Israel dramatically, and could lead to the total annihilation, destruction, nuclear-wise, of Damascus. And that's where Israel would become really a pariah nation, and see a lot of sanctions against it, which I think is picked up on in Isaiah 17 verse 4, where it says, now in that day the glory of Jacob will fade, and the fatness of his flesh will become lean. I think it's talking about economic sanctions and hardships that are going to be imposed on Israel because of what happens to Damascus. That's the context, is that Damascus is basically removed from being a city. Verse 1, it says, the oracle concerning Damascus, behold, Damascus is about to be removed from being a city and will become a fallen ruin. Damascus is destroyed, and as a result of that, Israel seems to become this pariah nation that is sanctioned and possibly receive some kind of economic major hardships from basically probably numerous nations imposing some kind of what we see now, where it's a divestment and neutralization of any kind of economic ties with Israel. We could see that happening, and that would be a direct fulfillment of Isaiah 17, which I think could happen very, very soon. And this event that Caroline Glick talks about could very well lead to that. We need to keep an eye on that. So as Christians, keep an eye on what's happening with Israel and what they're going to do now. She's talking about them using some kind of standoff munitions. And if they use standoff munitions, how's that going to work to effectively engage forces, and then how that could happen if Russians are directly killed in these events. And who knows, and you got to remember, before, Israel was notifying Russia before they attacked. If they realize that Russia's working with them, they're no longer going to notify them, which means that Russia doesn't have time to remove its forces or to warn them, hey, our forces are there. And because of that, you could have direct conflict, between Israel and Russia. And that could very well lead to, again, that hook being set to the jaw of Gog Magog and brought down into this war that ultimately we know as the Gog Magog War of Ezekiel 37 and 38. And ultimately, I think that lays the stage for this final end times event, which will ultimately be, which is where we're going to jump into real quick here, which will be the rise of the Antichrist, his beast empire, with the fall of Russia, Turkey, and Iran, and the associated forces. I mean, you're going to see a rise of this vacuum being filled by this final beast empire, and we know him to lead it will be the Antichrist ultimately, as these 10 leaders give their power and authority to them, and it'll be global. So I think global government will ultimately be the name of the day, and with that will come this global economic market system, which we all know as the mark of the beast. So we'll jump in Revelation chapter 13. Revelation 13 says, and we've read it many times, but Revelation 13 basically just says that, and in verse 16, and he calls us all, talking about this false prophet and this Antichrist being, he calls us all, small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, or free and slave, to be given a mark on the right hand on their forehead, and he provides that no one will be able to buy or sell except he has the mark, either the name of the beast or the number of his name. Here is wisdom. Let him who understands calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of man, and his number is 666. How's that got any kind of bearing on this, right? Well, interesting enough, what we're seeing is, and I think this is a precursor to the mark of the beast, an economic system, an economic marking system that is tied to digitally to every individual and every person, so that they can control, ultimately, all buy and sell and control all people. So that's really what it comes down to, And what I think is happening right now is there's an announcement that I saw that was really interesting, and basically what it said was that Walmart and Disney basically said that, all of its employees have to, take the jab, you know what I'm talking about. We don't want to be blocked. So if they have to take the jab, well, if they have to do that, then think about that for a minute. You're talking about big companies, massive companies with lots of employees, and they have to take the jab, to be employed there, right? Without it, you're not going to be able to buy, sell, or trade in a sense. You can see this being used as a precursor, a forerunner to the mark of the beast. If it works for that, won't it work for this? Once you see it being used for this, won't it be used for this? Or can this mark of the beast be some kind of economic system that it also is tied to some kind of thing that allows for you to determine not only can this person buy, sell, or trade, but has he given his allegiance to? Has he worshipped the beast? And not only that, has his health records, has he taken a vaccine? You can see where all this can be played out and tied to each individual. And I think this is a precursor to it, where if the courts are coming out and saying, yes, employers can do this, they can make you take the jab, then certainly they can also say, well, yeah, they can make you take this new economic system identification, even if it's embedded, because it's for the safety and well-being of all people, just like the jab is. It's for the safety and well-being of all people, even though we know it's not necessary for the safety and well-being of all people, but in my opinion, as I'm seeing it, and there's a lot of evidence out there for it, but the reality is you sit there and you look at it and you go, wait a minute, if you have to take this marking system for the safety and well-being of all people, so we can see your identification, so we can make sure you've got the appropriate jabs, so we can make sure that you got the appropriate allegiance. And if it's legal, if you set the precedence that it's legal for you to do that, for your employers to do that to your employees, then it's only one step away from them saying you also have to have some form of embedded identification or economic marking system that's tied to you as an individual that allows you to in essence be a citizen of this new global entity empire that allows you to buy, sell, or trade, and for us to see who you are, what kind of health requirements you've met, what kind of allegiance that you've given, and what kind of worship service you've done. And that could very well be what we could see taking place as a forerunner right now. And so when I read that both Disney and Walmart have said that they're going to force this on their employees, that's shocking. And that's something that every American should be concerned about, because where do you stop? Yeah, you may agree with something today on the jab, but you won't necessarily agree with it on other things. It's too late. The precedent has already been set, and very dangerous, in my opinion. And I think the Bible, agrees wholeheartedly with what I'm saying. It will lead to something, I think this is a forerunner for that, to the coming economic marking systems we know as mark of the beast. So we as Christians need to be aware of that. So those two events, I think, have laid the foundation for a dramatic change and a rapid movement towards the soon end of this age events, as we know as a tribulation, the 7-year tribulation period, and which means obviously that the rapture of the church, I believe, is very, very soon. And the events, as we know it as the end of times, latter days, these type of words, end of the age, those events are rapidly increasing, and I think that it's very soon going to be upon the world. Now, as Christians, we need to be aware that some people say, oh, well, just, rapture views, just, escapism. No. I think it absolutely is fundamental teaching to be able to harmonize and reconcile Scripture. But it's not escapism, as what I would say to Christians, even though, you believe pre-tribulation rapture or not, because I have heard people who are pre-tribulationists say, well, pre-tribulationists won't be here, we don't have to worry about it. No, you don't know that. You don't know what, up to that point, the things that events are going to happen up to the point of the rapture. We don't have that much information in that sense. We do know there's going to be a rapture, and I certainly do believe it's pre-tribulational. But I think that events can certainly happen up to that point, and we as Christians need to understand that. We could find ourselves in situations where you can't get a job, you can't work, you can't do things that you would normally do. Even simple stuff like go to a store. And we see where Don Lemon's coming out now saying, for CNN, in their obvious stupidity, as they typically do, in their over-the-top stupidity that they often do. But he comes out and he says, that people who don't take the jab should be able to go to the store and buy food. They shouldn't be able to work. If they, this kind of insanity, even though it's an experimental vaccine that we can obviously has hurt thousands and thousands of people, hundreds of thousands of people have been, injured by it, and many, many thousands have died from it. And that's just the ones we know about that are reported for it. It doesn't even go into effect account for the ones who haven't been reported but have died from it, and been affected in severe ways by it. So, I'm just saying there's some real dangers there, so it's why some people say, it's just not safe. And, you could certainly get sick and die from any disease, including the ones that this is supposed to prevent you from. But at the same time, if you got a drug that's really not proven to stop you and not proven to stop this illness, which it doesn't seem to do, that's why people who have gotten a jab continue to get the virus. Even if they may not die, supposedly, they're still sick from it. And, and then the effects that has had on people who have gotten the shot, it's just very dangerous, and that's why it makes people hesitant to trust. And when you got the government who's basically been caught lying and deceiving so many times and then manipulating information, and you just don't know who you can trust anymore, especially when it comes to government. As Christians, we certainly know we can't trust the government because they've been caught so many times lying, and they've put Christians, predominantly evangelical Christians, predominantly white evangelical Christians, on their list of most dangerous people, when we're probably the most least dangerous people in the entire world, including, and especially in this country. Yet they got to put you on the list of the most dangerous people, and then start basically stating that you're inherently the most evil people because you're inherently racist and all this other crazy stuff, which is crazy. That's basically saying that you're so racist you don't even know you're racist. It's just insane. What they're doing is saying that, it makes you have no trust in them, in the media, makes you have no trust in the government, makes you have no trust in the pharmaceutical industry and healthcare that you should have trust in. And you really need to have some doctors that I think can be honest and talk to you, even if it's off the record or whatever. I think more doctors need to do that, and step out of the room, whatever, and talk to you in a way that they can talk without fear of reprisal, and give you some really good information. Because it's just, we're at that point where we got, I think, a government that seems to be out of control. We have industry, medical, pharmaceutical, you name it, out of control. We have, technological companies that are using their technology to, undermine the freedoms of the citizens of this country, and the government seems to be supporting that. It's out of control on both ends. It's very fascist in many ways. You have, just the elements of that. Government is so just completely out of control. So as Christians, we don't know how long this is going to go on. So we need to be faithful citizens. We need to be faithful in that sense, but we also, more important, we need to be faithful citizens of the kingdom and our King, which is Jesus Christ. And our citizenship is in heaven. It's not here on earth. And our citizenship and loyalty is to Him. And we need to be faithful in sharing the good news with those who are lost around us. Share that good news while we have time, because the time, I think, is very short and the hours very short. Jesus Christ is coming back very soon. And when we see these things happening, I say, look up, lift up your head, for your redemption is drawing near. I see the end coming very quickly. I see that the end of this age is happening. So I think the rapture is near. And I'm just saying that. I'm not saying, this, I'm not just giving that out there and saying, well, hey, it's possible, it could be. No, I'm telling you, look, I've studied the scripture for many years and seeing the transition of this world and the rapid increases of strangeness in the world, hostility, violence, lawlessness, increasing elements that are happening in Israel for the Jews towards its, which is unique for Jews to have this kind of increase suddenly in their desire to go to the Temple Mount. That's unique. It hasn't really happened, and you've seen this increase since about 2011 on, and it's increased every year, and it's increasing rapidly now, where you're seeing hundreds and every day now are going to the Temple Mount of Jews. It's getting to the point where you're starting to see where there's like thousands wanting to go there and pray and do and things that you didn't see before. Now you're seeing that. That is an interesting time when they start talking about red heifer and these kind of things, you know. So you're seeing an increase in Jews basically desiring for the Temple Mount and to have a temple, these kind of things. We didn't have that before. Increase in lawlessness, increase in hostility towards nations to nation, and a military venturism by key nations, big nations, not little nations, big nations. Those are things that we would expect to see as we close in on the end of this age. So as Christians, we need to be praying, be faithful to our calling as ambassadors for the Lord, to share and witness to those who are lost around us. But these key events I just talked about, those are I think watershed moments that may line up to where it allows for what we would expect to see, you know, with Isaiah 17, destruction of Damascus, the ostracization of Israel as a nation, more so than they are, and ultimately will lead to the Gog Magog war, which then will lead to the rise, I think, of the beast empire, Antichrist, and this peace agreement that's being floated right now out there called the Abraham Accords, which will then, you know, be elevated to the point where you see them step in and become the champion to bring about peace. And actually he'd be the false Messiah who then goes into this rebuilt temple to, you know, which could happen at any time. You could hear an announcement to rebuild the temple, especially if we start seeing some interesting things happen with Jordan. If Jordan just falls apart, and there's a lot of instability happening in Jordan right now, and Jordan is kind of overseeing the wall, and you see Saudi Arabia wanting to kind of take over that, you know, where they kind of have, you know, authority over the spiritual sites, as it were. But, you know, Saudi Arabia's not in a secure place either, with, you know, their position being attacked by the Houthis and so forth in Yemen. You know, these kind of things are happening, which is causing a lot of instability. And very well things can change very rapidly. But these key points that happen with Russia basically shooting down these missiles, or assisting Syria in shooting down these missiles, could very well lead to the Gog Magog war, ultimately. And, you know, if that's the case, you know, like I said, it's pretty amazing times we live in. You know, very amazing times we live in. And as Christians, we need to be aware of that as Christians. And with this, you know, precursor, forerunner of, you know, forcing people to take experimental drugs commanded by, you know, basically being told, in essence, by your government to do this, you know, and then you have, you know, private organizations or companies going in line with this and being forced to do so. And I think it's only a matter of time before insurance companies will try to force these companies to force people to take it, or you lose your insurance and stuff like that. That is scary. That's really dangerous stuff. And, you know, in America and throughout the world, they're already starting to do this in other countries. And, you know, it's only a matter of time. So as Christians, we need to band together. We need to start thinking about this stuff. We need to be talking about this stuff with each other and realize, you know, hey, you know, I think this is a forerunner to that, to possibly using this. If you can do this with that, with forcing them to take a drug and saying you have to have it, there's no difference to that. And I think that's going to be on the minds of the politicians, that if they want to bring in an economic system that has total control over its citizens, knowing where they are, what they buy and sell and everything else, and that it would be able to, in essence, have a connection with your medical records so you know what person is at medically in that sense. You know, it's only one step. It's a very short step. You know, it's not a big, tremendous step. It's a very short step. And if the court systems agree with that, man, I tell you what, it needs to be a wake-up moment for Christians. Because I think the hour is very short, very late, and the Lord is coming back very, very soon for us. The bride will be with the Lord. I think the rapture is very near. And we need to be sharing the gospel with everyone around us, your workmates, your family, your friends. Share the good news with them, because, boy, the hour, I think, is really late. Anyway, God bless you. We look up. You know, this isn't something to be bad or depressed about. This is good, because the Lord is coming back soon, I believe. God bless you. And I hope, you know, that you're just faithful to the Lord and realize that that's our true calling, to be faithful to Him, not to this world and the God of this world. You know, our God is much higher. Greater is He who's in us than He's in the world. God bless you. Be safe.